How could he do this to me? And I trusted him. Men are scums.
The photo hit Adeline Johansson's phone at 11:47 p.m., the night before the biggest launch of her life. A grainy shot of a dark street in Itaewon, a man with his arms wrapped around a woman, her face buried in his chest, his hand pressed against the back of her head like he'd done it 100 times before. The man was Huang Seonam. Adeline had spent 4 months falling and drooling over him. Carefully, like falling hopelessly for someone when you've already been burned by people who claimed to love you. And now, 12 hours before she was supposed to walk onto a stage and introduce the world to a beauty collection she had named after him, a single photo was telling her she'd been a fool the whole time. Her phone buzzed again, a text from an unknown number. You should ask him who she really is before tomorrow. Adeline sat alone in her office, the launch banners still wrapped in plastic against the wall, and felt something break quietly inside her chest. If you think you know where this story is going, trust me, you don't. Hit that follow button right now, because what happens in the next 24 hours will change how you think about love, loyalty, and second chances. Before we get to what happens next, hit that like button, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and subscribe so you don't miss how this story ends. Let's rewind 3 months, back to where this all started.
Nobody in Seoul expected Magnus Johansson's daughter to end up running a skincare company out of a converted studio in Hongdae. Magnus had built the Johansson Group from ground up, the original founder's story of mud and battles, up to success and accolades, an American construction firm that expanded into South Korea 2 decades earlier and never left. He raised Adeline between Atlanta and Seoul, and by the time she was 29, everyone assumed she'd take her seat on his board like he'd always planned. Instead, Adeline spent her nights studying cosmetic chemistry, mixing formulas on her kitchen counter, chasing something her father called a hobby with good branding. Buildings stay standing, Adeline, he told her during one of their Sunday dinners. Lipstick washes off by Tuesday. But a family will always be around, that's what is most important. You are not young anymore, my dear. She never argued or tried to convince him, she just kept working on her potential goldmine. Now, 3 weeks from launching ACLAR, her skincare line, across every major department store in Korea, she barely had time to breathe, let alone date. That didn't stop her best friend Camille from setting her up anyway. His name is Huang Seonam, Camille said, sliding her phone across the table. Structural engineer. 32. And before you say no, look at his face first. Adeline looked at his photograph and immediately lost her composure, and found herself wanting to meet him sooner. She couldn't understand why her heart was playing a fast one on her. She said yes anyway, against her instincts telling her to stay home and finish her formula tests. 2 nights later, she stood outside a restaurant overlooking the Han River. A bit reluctant to go in as her nerves were on the edge, she nearly turned back twice before making up her mind and stepping inside. Seonam was already seated when she got in, standing the moment he saw her. His photograph didn't do him no justice, for he was even more handsome in person. His eyes sparkled against the low restaurant lighting when he smiled and said, "Hello, Adeline. You look like you're deciding if it would be a great idea to run off," he said, smiling. "I considered it in the elevator," Adeline admitted. He laughed, a cheeky but charming laughter. Something about the sound of it made her relax and sit down. The restaurant smelled of grilled short ribs and citrus soju, The river outside lit up gold and blue past the window glass. A waiter poured tea neither of them had ordered yet. Adeline noticed Seonam's hands first, rough at the knuckles in a way that didn't match his tailored jacket. The date started stiff, both of them trading resumes instead of stories. "So," Seonam said, unfolding his napkin like it was a peace treaty, "Camille told me you own a beauty company. She didn't tell me you'd look like you were about to sit through a board meeting." "I run 3 of those a week," Adeline said. "Force of habit." "Then let's not have a 4th. He had a way of getting across to her, weird but it worked wonders. Her shoulders loosened. Then, somewhere between the 2nd course and the 3rd, the whole evening softened. Seonam didn't ask what her company made. Instead, he asked why she started it and what was her inspiration. She told him about her mother, whose lapus had stolen her confidence long before it stole her health, and how Adeline wanted to build something gentle enough to give women that confidence back. Seonam told her about his own father, gone since Sam was 14, and the nights he'd spent teaching himself engineering out of library books because there was no one left to pay for lessons. "You build to protect people," Adeline said. "I build to help them feel like themselves again." Maybe that's not so different. Whenever the conversation drifted too close to her father, or her fear of never being enough for him, Adeline pulled back or changed the topic systematically, and Seonam noticed it. "It feels like you're protecting something," he said gently. She didn't deny it. "I don't know what it is, and I understand this is our first date, so I hope whatever you set your heart to, you achieve it," he said. By dessert, they both understood the same quiet truth. The connection was real, but the timing was terrible. 2 people fully consumed by careers that left no room for anything else. At about 9:37 p.m., he walked her to her car. They shook hands goodbye, and lingered as their hands held onto each other for a few long seconds, neither one let go. Driving away, Adeline told herself she'd met a genuinely good man, but at the worst possible time. Seonam watched her taillights disappear into traffic, certain of exactly one thing. He knew their story wasn't finished yet. Monday morning, Adeline's assistant knocked on her lab door with a familiar summons. Her father was on the phone and needed to speak to her. He wanted her at Johansson Group headquarters by 10. The building rose 30 stories above downtown Seoul, a place Adeline had run through as a little girl while her father lifted her onto his lap and let her hold his blueprints. Everything starts with a plan, well concocted for a purpose. "You either get it all right, or lose some," he used to tell her. She believed him, until she realized his plan had never once included asking what she actually wanted. Magnus stood by the window when she walked in, the city skyline behind him like a throne room. "The board is in need of a critical thinker, and they have unanimously voted you onto executive sessions," he said, without turning around. "It's time you set aside childish experiments and stop treating skincare as a real project, Adeline." "It's not a side project, father. It's my legacy. My dream and everything mother would have wanted." His face softened for a moment. "You sound just like your mother," he said quietly. "She always believed people should choose their own path, even when it's obvious they're making terrible life-altering decisions." The door opened before Adeline could respond. Seonam walked in, with a file of papers that were the structural reports in his hand, and froze the second he saw her. It turned out the man from her blind date wasn't just an engineer. He was Johansson Group's director of engineering, 12 years in, the one person Magnus trusted the most to deliver at his job. He oozed integrity and hard work, and he trusted Seonam to always deliver. Magnus glanced between them, delighted. "What did I miss? Seems like you 2 already know each other." "We had dinner a few weeks ago," Seonam said carefully. Small world," Magnus said, laughing. "Like minds, they say, always attract each other." Adeline groaned. Seonam laughed despite himself. As she left, he caught up to her near the elevator. "It was good seeing you again. I have to say, you look astonishing," he said. "Thank you very much. It wasn't nearly as awkward as I remembered our first date being," she admitted with a cheek smile, as the elevator door opened, and he watched as she stepped inside, a bit shy. As the elevator doors closed slowly, she looked back through the gap to steal a last glance of him. He was still watching her, and this time, neither of them looked away. Adeline told herself that running into Seonam again meant nothing more than a coincidence, not the hands of fate trying to pull them close together. She buried herself in her work in preparations of her product launching, certain there was no room in her life for distractions, not even with ocean-deep eyes and a voice that made her forget her own name. 3 days later, during the early morning rush, he showed up in line at a coffee shop in Hongdae. Adeline happened to be on the line too. He was out of his office clothes, insisting on paying before she could stop him. That weekend, Camille dragged her to a charity gala for flood relief, where Seonam appeared again, explaining that he was only there for the cocktail and her charming, elusive personality. He could tell that she was skeptical not about him, but about dating her father's employee. But before the night ended, Seonam had swept her off her feet completely without her knowing it. Adeline realized they weren't so different after all, just two goal-driven high performers whom fate was trying to bring together. It wasn't just a coincidence anymore. Coincidence slowly turned into routine. Morning coffee some days. Evening walks along the Han River and through the park, comfortable silences neither one felt the need to fill, they just enjoyed each other's presence. One night, sitting on a bench overlooking the river lights, Adeline opened up and told him about her mother again, this time the parts she always kept buried, how watching her mother lose her confidence had shaped every formula Adeline ever made. Seonam didn't offer advice. He simply said, "I know I don't know your mom, but I can tell that she would be proud of you." Adeline admitted her deepest fear, that she would never be enough for her father, no matter what she built. Seonam, who had spent years chasing a version of himself his own late father might have been proud of, built a life his father never gave him. He took her hand. "Anyone who only measures your worth against their own expectations," he said, "will never truly see who you've become." Neither of them said the word yet, but it was obvious that they were falling in love, and everyone around them could see it. Camille caught Adeline wearing lipstick to a Sunday morning coffee run and grinned. "You like him?" "A lot." Adeline didn't argue. "You talk too much sometimes, Camille." "This is your fault that I am in this," she replied. Across town the following afternoon, the atmosphere inside the high-floor glass conference room of Johansson's corporate headquarters was thick with high-stakes tension. Sunlight filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long, sharp shadows across the polished oak table where architectural blueprints, compliance audits, and heavy binders were neatly arrayed. Seonam stood at the head of the table, impeccably composed despite the exhaustive presentation he had just delivered. As the lead structural engineer on the project, he had spent months overseeing every minute detail of Adeline's ambitious new state-of-the-art manufacturing facility. With a final, confident slide, he presented the conclusive structural integrity reports. Every stringent safety inspection had passed with flying colors, cleared by both municipal boards and independent auditors. The massive facility, a cornerstone investment designed to handle the upcoming nationwide product launch, was fully operational and ready to run. With the nationwide rollout precisely 2 weeks away, a collective wave of relief washed through the room. As the room gradually cleared and the murmur of departing executives faded down the hallway, Seonam began packing his documents into his leather briefcase. "Seonam, stay behind for a moment, if you would." Magnus, who remained seated at the head of the table, his hands folded deliberately over a closed leather dossier. Seonam paused, adjusting his cuffs before stepping closer to the head of the table. "Of course, sir. Is there something in the secondary safety report you'd like me to clarify?" Magnus didn't glance at the papers. He leaned back, his sharp, discerning eyes locking onto Seonam with an intensity that had broken lesser men in boardrooms for decades. He wasn't thinking about steel beams or floor loads. Magnus already knew about the subtle glances, the late-night phone calls, and the quiet, undeniable bond that had developed between Seonam and his daughter, Adeline. In Magnus's world, nothing of significance remained hidden for long. "We can skip the structural engineering," Magnus said, his tone devoid of small talk, dropping into a register that was purely personal. His question cut straight through the remaining professional air of the room, sharp and unyielding. "Are your intentions with my daughter serious?" The weight of the question hung heavily in the quiet room, carrying the full brunt of a father's protective instinct and a powerful man's demand for absolute truth. Seonam didn't flinch, nor did he look away to compose a politician's answer. He met Magnus's gaze directly, his posture solid and unshakable. "Yes, sir," Seonam answered, his voice firm, clear, and without a single shred of hesitation. "They are." Magnus unlocked a drawer and placed two nearly identical folders on the desk. One held the real inspection report. The other was forged, rewritten with fabricated violations recommending an immediate shutdown of Adeline's facility. "Two folders," Magnus said, sliding both across the desk. "Only one of them needs your signature." Seonam opened the false report slowly, reading through numbers he knew were lies because he had personally verified every inch of that building. "There's nothing wrong with this facility," he said. "You know that better than anyone." "I know my daughter is about to walk away from everything I built for her," Magnus said. "This isn't about the building, it's about bringing her home." His plan was simple and cold. If her company collapsed before launch, she'd have no choice but to return to Johansson Group. He wanted Seonam to submit the false report and destroy her dream to protect what he called his legacy. Seonam refused instantly. "She spent 10 years building her own legacy," he said. "I became an engineer so people could trust me with their lives. Signing that report would crush her and also make me someone I never want to be." Magnus pushed harder, reminding him of 5 loyal years, a promotion to vice president within reach. "You'd throw all of that away for a woman you've known a few months? Look, if you do this for me, I would give you both my blessings and a lot more." Seonam's answer was quiet and certain. "I'm so sorry, sir, I'm not doing this for her, but for the truth." Magnus studied him for a long moment, something like disappointment settling into his face. "Then clean out your desk by Friday, if you will not be doing my bidding," he said. "I'll find someone else willing to sign it." "You won't find anyone willing to lie about a building that could collapse on real people," Seonam said. "Not for a promotion. Not for you." That night, driving aimlessly past the night skylines, his mother called, sensing something in his silence. She prodded him and he told her what transpired that morning. "Choose whatever decision lets you sleep peacefully," she told him, words he needed more than she knew. Meanwhile, Adeline stood alone in her lab when a text arrived. "Can we meet tomorrow morning?" Followed a moment later by, "I hope it will be good news." She stared at the message for a long time, sensing a storm coming that had nothing to do with the weather. Seonam told her everything the next morning. Her father's plan. The forged report. His refusal. The job he no longer had. Adeline wasn't shocked so much as heartbroken. She recognized the pattern instantly, the quiet way her father had once bought out a lab space from under her, the way he'd pressured a landlord to triple her old rent. He had never believed her dream could survive without him. She should have felt only love for Seonam in that moment, for choosing her over everything he'd built. And for 2 glowing weeks, she did. Then, the night before launch, the photograph landed in her phone. Seonam, arms wrapped around a woman on a dark Itaewon street, her face pressed into his chest. Adeline didn't sleep that night. She didn't call him. She sat with her own silence, replaying every quiet moment they'd shared, wondering if all of it had been real, or just another man telling her what she wanted to hear? By morning, she had her answer ready. Cold. Final. We need to talk before the launch, she texted him. He arrived at her office an hour later, confused by the ice in her voice. She turned her phone toward him, the photo filling the screen, her hand not quite steady. 12 hours before my big break, Seom, she said. I need you to explain this to me right now, and I need it to be the truth and nothing more. For a moment, Seonam said nothing. He looked at the photo, then at her face, and something in him seemed to fold inward, not with guilt, but with something closer to grief. That's my sister, he said quietly. Mylin. Our mother collapsed 2 nights ago. Early signs of the same illness that took our father. I was holding her up because she couldn't stand on her own. The office went silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. Why didn't you tell me? Adeline whispered. Because you had a launch in 12 hours, and I didn't want my family's pain to become your distraction the night before the biggest day of your life, Seonam said. I was wrong. I should have told you the moment it happened, instead of letting you find out from a stranger's phone. Adeline sat down slowly, the anger draining out of her, replaced by something heavier. Shame, for believing a stranger's anonymous text over 4 months of a man proving exactly who he was. Someone sent me that photo on purpose, she said. Timed exactly the night before launch. They both understood at the same moment who benefited most from Adeline doubting the one person who had refused to betray her. Her father's assistant had access to Seonam's building security footage. It wasn't hard to trace the burner number back to a phone Magnus had purchased in cash 3 days earlier. Adeline didn't confront her father with anger this time. She confronted him with something quieter and far more devastating. You forged a report to destroy my life's dream, seriously, she said, her voice trembling not with tears, but with a cold, sharp rage that cut through the silence. And when that failed, you tried to destroy my relationship with Seonam. That has to be the most zesty, bitter thing you've ever done. What kind of legacy is that, Dad? Magnus had no answer that didn't sound like an excuse, even to himself. He stood near the corner of his vast oak desk, surrounded by the gold-framed accolades and corporate portraits that had defined his identity for 40 years. The report lay open between them, its fraudulent signatures glaringly obvious under the desk lamp's amber glow. Beside it sat the fabricated text threads meant to poison her trust in Seonam, a desperate, petty scheme that felt grotesquely out of place for a man who ran an international enterprise. She stepped closer, her jaw set, looking at him not as a daughter looks at a revered parent, but as a judge looks at a convict. The silence stretched until Magnus finally let out a heavy, defeated sigh. The tight, unyielding posture he had maintained for decades seemed to collapse inward. I'm sorry, Adeline, Magnus murmured, his voice cracked and entirely stripped of its usual authority. I am so deeply sorry. What I did was abhorrent, and there is no justification for it. He looked up, meeting her gaze with a rare, raw honesty. I didn't want to destroy your life, I was trying to keep you in mine, he confessed softly. I built this company from nothing, Adeline. It's my entire life's work, and my legacy to you. I thought you were stepping completely out of my world. I panicked. I thought if your independent venture failed, and if your personal ties were severed, you'd finally come back. I did all of it because I wanted you, and only you to take over my company as CEO when I retire. But in trying to secure my legacy, I almost destroyed the only thing that actually matters. Adeline found Seonam that evening at his mother's hospital room, sitting quietly beside her bed. She didn't say anything at first. She simply sat down on his other side and took his hand. I'm sorry, she said. I let one lie almost cost me the truth. You had every reason to doubt me, Seonam said. I gave you a reason to. No, Adeline said. You gave me 12 loyal years to a company that betrayed you the moment it mattered, and you still chose honesty. That's not a reason to doubt someone. That's a reason to trust them completely. His mother, still weak, squeezed Adeline's fingers gently and smiled. "You're the reason he's been smiling again," she whispered in Korean, and Seonam translated it with tears in his eyes. That night, Adeline brought him to her quiet lab and showed him her very first formula, an imperfect, slightly discolored cream she'd kept in a drawer for 8 years, because every dream deserves to remember where it started. He showed her the small model bridge he'd built in university, carried to every office job since, proof that big things always start small. "I spent my whole life proving I didn't need anyone," Adeline admitted. "I was wrong. Not because I need rescuing. Because I want someone willing to stand beside me." "I'll stand beside you," Seonam said. "Every single time." They kissed slowly, certain, unhurried, two people choosing each other with no guarantees, only the conviction that it was worth everything it might cost. Launch morning arrived under a clear Seoul sky. By 7, the ACLAR showroom buzzed with beauty editors, influencers, and investors flown in from 3 continents. Before the event, Seonam brought Adeline a small box. Inside sat a necklace, one deep blue stone beside a rose gold flower. "Ocean and blush," he said. "The name of your new collection. And a promise that I remember everything that matters to you." On stage, Adeline told the room about mixing her first terrible formula in a tiny Hongdae apartment, about a mother who taught her that confidence was never about perfection, only about believing you were enough. When the screen behind her revealed the collection's name, the room rose in applause. Near the back, her father slipped in quietly. He hadn't planned to come. Her words from days earlier, "You don't believe in me," had followed him every hour since. Watching her command that room, he finally understood this had never been a hobby. When the crowd rose to their feet, Magnus stood too, clapping slowly, sincerely, his eyes finally saying what his pride had never let him say out loud. Afterward, amid champagne and a flood of new orders, Seonam found a quiet moment beside her. "Thank you," he said, "for reminding me success means nothing without someone to share it with." "Thank you," Adeline answered, "for reminding me love should never ask you to give up your dreams." That evening, walking the riverfront where it had all begun, Seonam handed her a folded blueprint, plans for a future ACLAR research institute, something he'd started designing the same week he lost his job. He hadn't just been planning a building. He'd been planning a future with her. Adeline touched the pendant at her neck and smiled. "The world's going to think this collection is named for the ocean," she said. "But the blush is still your fault." He laughed, and kissed her beneath the Seoul skyline, two people who had chosen each other completely. 1 year later, Adeline stood atop the newly completed ACLAR Research Institute, watching the sun set over the Han River. Her products now sold across Korea, the United States, and the Caribbean, but what mattered most were the letters from customers who wrote about finding their confidence again. Seonam joined her with coffee, as he always did. Looking down at the building that had once been an empty lot, he said quietly, "It was just a blueprint once." "So were we," she answered. The institute stood as proof of the leap he'd taken after leaving Johansson Group. With his sister finally recovering and his mother stable under new treatment, Seonam had started his own structural design firm within months of walking away. This building, the one they now stood inside, had been his young company's very first commission. 3 more contracts followed before the year was out. Camille burst in moments later carrying an absurd amount of dessert, taking full credit for the blind date that started it all. Seonam allowed her 10% of the credit, and not 1% more. That afternoon, Magnus arrived unannounced. Walking through the labs his daughter had built with her own hands, he finally said the words she'd waited years to hear. "You built all of this," he said. "And I almost destroyed it because I couldn't separate my dream from yours." He placed an old photograph on her desk, Adeline as a little girl in a hard hat beside her parents. Her mother, he admitted quietly, had never wanted her to inherit Johansson Group. That had only ever been his dream. Her mother's dream was simpler, that Adeline would wake up every morning excited to go to work. Magnus apologized, plainly, without excuse, for confusing his dream with hers, and for the anonymous text he never should have sent. Adeline hugged him, and for the first time since losing her mother, he let himself cry in front of her. A month later, everyone gathered at the same restaurant overlooking the Han River where Adeline and Seonam had first met. Nervous in a way Camille had never seen from him, Seonam pulled out a small velvet box. "The strongest things people build," he said, "aren't buildings. They're the lives they build with the people they love." He asked her to build the rest of her life with him. She said yes, and he kissed her beneath the Seoul sunset as everyone around them applauded. Months later, a new product appeared quietly on ACLAR shelves, ocean blue and rose gold, with a simple printed message inside every box: "True beauty begins with believing in yourself, and the right person will never ask you to become someone else. They'll believe in what you're already building." Only Adeline and Seonam knew it was really the story of how they began. Some people build companies. Some people build cities. But the luckiest people build a life with someone who believes in their dreams as deeply as they believe in their own, and sometimes, it all starts with one blind date, one photograph, and one choice to trust the truth over the lie.